Now, Travis Scott, the Astroworld tragedy, and 19 months later. I want to talk a little bit about this recent update regarding the Astroworld tragedy story. In this video, we're going to go over one really big update in relation to this tragic incident. I want to give you my take and perspective on it, like always. And yeah, if you enjoy this video, you know what to do. Like it. Now, Travis La Flame Scott. It's definitely been a little while since we last spoke about the man Travis himself. The last time I spoke about him, we talked about him being back to doing festivals once again. Now, that was pretty significant considering how big of a story the Astroworld tragedy was. Now, the Astroworld Festival tragedy, like you probably already know, was of course a horrific incident which took the lives of 10 people. 10 people who showed up to the festival with the intention of having a good time. 10 people who at the end of that festival were expecting to make it back home to their families, but didn't. I want to start off this video by shining a light on all the victims who lost their lives in this tragedy. Axel Acosta, 21, was a student. He was studying computer science at Western Washington University and decided to travel from Washington to Texas to attend the Astroworld Festival by himself. It was his first time going to an event like that, and it was also, unfortunately, his last. Danish Beg, 27 years old, from Euless, Texas, was at the Astroworld Festival with his fiancée, Olivia Swingle. Danish fell during the chaos and was trampled by the concert goers while trying to shield his fiancée from the danger around him. Danish unfortunately died as a result of the trampling. He was described as a hard-working man who loved his family and an innocent young soul who would always put others before him. And that's exactly what he did in his last moments, put others before him. In this case, his fiancée that he loved so much. Ezra Blount, 9 years old, was a young boy who loved skateboarding, music, playing Fortnite, and was also an avid Travis Scott fan. He was at the Astroworld Festival in Houston on November 5th with his father, Treston. Ezra was on his dad's shoulders at the festival when the two became trapped in the deadly crowd surge. People started pushing, there weren't any exits, and Ezra's father ended up passing out. It's unknown to Ezra's family what exactly happened to the young boy after that. But what they did come to find out was that Ezra was at a nearby hospital listed as a John Doe. The young boy was in a medically induced coma for days and suffered from irreversible organ failure. On November 14, 2021, a few days after the tragedy had happened, it was confirmed that 9-year-old Ezra had succumbed to his injuries. Madison Dubisky, 23 years old, attended the University of Mississippi and worked in advertising and marketing. She was described as a super bright, uplifting, and sweet girl who was the life of the party everywhere she went. Madison attended the Astroworld Festival together with her younger brother Ty. During the height of the chaos that ensued in the crowd, her brother tried holding on to his sister's hand and tried to pull her into safety, but in the end, Madison and her brother got separated. She ended up passing away from the injuries that was caused by the trampling. Madison's family, after this tragic incident that took away their loved one, ended up launching a non-profit organization called the Pink Bows Foundation. The foundation's goal was and is to partner with live entertainment events across the country as advocates for safety, so other families don't have to go through the pain and the suffering they went through as a result of the lack of safety at the event. John Hilgert, 14 years old, was a high school freshman at the Memorial High School in Houston, Texas. John, just like all the other victims in his story, went to the festival in hopes of having a good time. That was unfortunately the last time 14-year-old John went to another festival. Jacob Yernick, 20 years old, and Franco Patino, 21 years old, were best friends. They both traveled to the Astroworld Festival to enjoy the event and share an experience of a lifetime. That was, however, unfortunately the last experience they would share together. Jacob and Franco ended up succumbing to the injuries that was caused onto their bodies by the stampede. They died 20 minutes apart in the hospital. Rudy Pena, 23 years old, was a student at the Loretto College in Texas. Rudy studied criminology and was working as a medical assistant. He had hopes of becoming a border patrol officer one day. He was the youngest of 5 children. Only hours before the tragedy, Rudy had called home to say that he made it safely to Houston. A few hours later, however, at around midnight, his stepfather Danny received a phone call informing him that Rudy had just died. Brianna Rodriguez, 16 years old, was a high school student with a passion for dancing. She was a member of the Heights High School Redcoats dance team and was described as a vibrant young woman who had a very bright future. Unfortunately, Brianna never got to see that future through. Barty Shahani, 22 years old, was a computer science student at the Agriculture and Mechanical College of Texas. She was described as a calm, attentive young woman who had a bright future ahead of her. Barty, just like all the other victims who lost their lives, went to the festival for one reason and one reason only. She wanted to have a good time. Leading up to her passing, Barty was on a ventilator. She showed no brain activity shortly after her hospitalization and unfortunately ended up succumbing to the critical injuries that was caused onto her. One of the saddest things about this Astroworld tragedy is the fact that the victims in this horrible incident were forgotten and lost in the conversation. And it really saddens me because these were 10 people who were expecting to come home that night. They had their entire lives in front of them. All of them were very bright human beings, and they went out in this very tragic fashion. I really just wanted to go over their stories briefly just so you remember their names and faces. Because if that happened to somebody I love, I would want somebody with a platform to do the same for me and my family. I mean, we had a 9-year-old boy, man, like a 9-year-old little boy who ended up dying at this festival. So I look at that and I'm like, damn, that could literally be my little cousins, man. And even though I don't know this little boy and I don't have no connection to him and his family, I mean, that might as well be my little brother. You get what I'm saying? May their souls rest eternally. They will not be forgotten. Now that we got that extremely necessary, I might add, part out of the way, I want to talk about this recent news that just came out. Have you guys heard? If you haven't, well, you know that's why I'm here, right? I got you. Like the video because Blackie got your back, and if you're doing the dishes and your hands are dirty, wash them first so you don't mess up your phone. About a couple of days ago, it was revealed that Travis Scott is officially in the clear, i.e. he will not be facing any legal repercussions for this tragedy. You might hear that and say, legal actions? What are you talking about? Well, that's what I thought to myself initially, until I remember the severity of this situation. And even though Travis Scott did not commit a crime, as a result of the immense impact this tragedy had, the court had to make an evaluation as to what was going to happen and how they were going to move forward with this case. Travis had a lot of lawsuits thrown his way. I believe most, if not all, the families filed some type of lawsuit, which is understandable and I don't fault them for that. The grand jury of Houston, who was overseeing this case, has officially made a decision. Travis Scott will not be indicted in connection with the tragedy that took the lives of 10 people. Our job is to determine if this tragedy involved criminal activity by anyone. In this instance, the grand jury found that no crime did occur, that no single individual was criminally responsible. It is a tragedy that 10 innocent people were killed while trying to enjoy an evening of music and entertainment, something many of us do routinely and without a second thought to our safety. But a tragedy isn't always a crime, and not every death is a homicide. Travis' lawyer Kent Schaefer ended up responding to this decision by saying, "My client Travis Scott will not be charged with criminal charges or any wrongdoings for his involvement with the Astroworld Festival. Today's decision by the Harris County District Attorney confirms what we have known all along, that Travis Scott is not responsible for the Astroworld tragedy." Now, the lead investigator of this case described the tragedy as the following. A large gathering of participants and concert goers were already in place at stage 1. It was a very anticipated event to see the lead performer, the investigator said. The remaining participants at SZA's earlier set moved to the main stage for Scott, he said, at which point this area became more crowded, leading to further compaction. Now, check out this next part right here. Just to be clear, this was not a crowd stampede. This was not a stage rush. This was not a crowd surge, he continued. This was a slow compaction or constriction into this quadrant, resulting in collapses within the crowd that covered a very small area. Now, this is very interesting, guys, because the lead investigator of this case literally just said that this was not a crowd stampede. They also said that this was not a crowd surge, which is also very important. They, however, describe it as a slow compaction / constriction. Compaction, for all my international viewers, shout out to y'all, I love you, essentially just means when something is getting crushed or compressed, i.e. it's pancaking, if you will. Constriction, on the other hand, means when something is in the process of becoming tighter and narrower. So this is how the lead investigator is describing this from their point of view. This was not a stampede. That's what they're saying, right? For this tragedy to be considered a stampede, from my perspective and interpretation, I guess it would have to take more than what actually happened. Because even though this incident involved a whole lot of people getting stomped on, I guess for this to be, labeled that, it would just take more than what just actually went down. Now, I can't really explain it further than that because no full report has been released. So whatever specific arguments they have for why they came to this decision, we can't really understand at this point in time. All we really know right now is that the description of this tragedy is not what we think it was and, what we've been calling it. Literally what I just called it like a few minutes ago. I don't know if this plays a part in your mind in terms of you feeling like, hey, he needs to be held liable from a legal standpoint, but I do think it's one of the most important and interesting findings here. It's also been reported by a Troy Finner who works at the Houston Police Department that a 1,000+ page report produced by all the investigators involved will be released to the public as an effort to show transparency. When that does get released, we're going to find out a lot of things, why exactly they came to the decision and, how they came to it. That's obviously important because we got 10 different families and 10 different communities, who lost their loved ones now getting this news that Travis will not be held liable from a legal standpoint. No matter what way you look at it, and no matter what I personally think, I can understand that they might look at this right here as a huge loss. Actually, this is a loss because they're the only ones who felt the loss. As for what I personally think, I think this is the right decision here. I don't think Travis Scott should have ever faced criminal charges for the Astroworld tragedy. To me, the way I viewed it is this. This was a 50,000 people crowd that should have not been 50,000 people because they were not equipped to handle this amount of people. But it's easy to say in hindsight. I believe they had 700 something security personnel, about 530 Houston police officers were also working at the festival. Clearly it just wasn't enough. So many people, this big of a crowd crammed into, this small of a space in contrast to the number of people attending, a disaster waiting to happen. So I look at it and I say, Travis Scott wasn't the only person who played a part in this horrible outcome. This was just a big event where everything was lacking. Now, it was Travis Festival, yes, but also he's the artist who's on stage in front of all these people focused on performing. He was at one point informed that people were passing out, and according to him and his legal team, he didn't have the authority to stop the festival, which I don't believe. Now that's beside the point. I don't think despite that he could have predicted the horrible outcome in any shape or form. I just think it's insane to assume that any human being would want this outcome. Who would want their fans to go out like this? I mean, that's just so crazy to even put it on someone. So I look at this tragic story and I say, this is not the fault of one person. This is the fault of a lot of moving parts not being sufficient enough to support the size of a crowd like this. Travis Scott is the face of this thing, which is why he's automatically going to take the majority of the blame. But I still stand by what I said because I know that when there are so many moving parts in any given situation, especially when it involves this amount of people and those moving parts are lacking and have a chink in their armor, something is bound to go wrong, and that's what happened here. Combine that with the culture of his fan base, which he's responsible for cultivating, and there we have a disaster waiting to happen. As for that last part, the culture of Travis Scott's fan base is obviously horrible. I mean, ragers. That's what he calls his fan base. And that's one aspect I would say contributed to the escalation of the tragedy. And this was one aspect of the evaluation for this case. Did Travis Scott incite violence, given that he does egg his fans on to rage and go crazy? In the end, he didn't get held accountable for that, but should he? One thing I do realize is, despite what I think about that, is that he can't truly control people, right? This is an audience of 50,000 people. Those are individuals who make individual decisions despite what anybody says. So that's what I think about that. And it's of course very sad that it went down the way it went down, because at the end of the day, guys, there's still a bunch of families grieving right now as we speak. And at the forefront of this tragic story is a bunch of conversations that have nothing to do with their loved ones. So once again, I just want to give my condolences to the families of the victims who are affected by this. May their souls eternally rest, and that's all I have to say. Anyway, like the video before you leave. Can you do me that favor? Thank you, sir or miss. I appreciate you for making it till the end. I appreciate you for listening. And guys, if you want to show me a little bit of love, hit me up on IG, send me a message. Anyone who genuinely just shows me love, I'm always respond. Just know that. Anyway, once again, I appreciate you for listening and making it till the end. And I want you to have a blessed day. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. Keep demolishing that plate. And I'll catch you tomorrow. Peace. I'm out.